I'm aware of at least 2 topics for today. We were supposed to hopefully have some people attending from the Edk2 platforms repo, and we can have a conversation about adding CI to that repo and what kind of changes might be needed to do that. Unfortunately, I don't know if we have people for that. We'll see. The other topic, Dunn, Michael Kubaki, and myself have been briefly talking around how to add shell tests to the OVMF in the CI system. So I was hoping we'd have any questions we could answer there. Beyond that, are there opens that anyone wants to bring up?
My usual, what's the status of code coverage?
Yep. Okay.
Are you just taking a list of opens right now?
Sure. If they're quick, we can solve them. If they're bigger, we should do it.
Mine was just whether anyone has a problem with me submitting the wiki series or merging that into that repo.
This is the how to build, right?
Yeah. I'm starting to get the reviews trickling in on the Edk2 side. I'll probably need some help there. But on the wiki side, I think I've seen Sean and Rebecca have had feedback that I've addressed, and I think it's in a state that we could go ahead and just get it in. And then if we want to improve it, we can do that on top of it.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. That was my feedback as well.
Okay, if no one has any concern with that, then I will go ahead and do it.
Okay. Any other opens?
There's
okay. Oh, go ahead.
It's not really tools and CI related, but we might want to talk about it at some point. It may end up being solved with tools or CI in some way. But there was the variable lock protocol and the variable policy stuff. Did we have like a plan within Edk2, like a formal plan to fully deprecate the variable lock protocol and move to policy that anyone's aware of?
I think we had discussed the steps that needed to occur, which was first clean up all of the Tina core repos for that use, which I don't think is done yet, and then make sure all the downstreams, give them notice that they should make sure they get their stuff cleaned up before we consider deleting the Verilog protocol from the EDK2 repo. So it's a 3-step plan.
Yeah, that's what I saw in Bugzilla. I saw all the BZs open against the downstream stuff in EDK2 platforms, and then there was one on the security package, I think, to fully clean up its usage of variable lock, but I didn't see it track any others tracking the other usage, like an MDE module. So maybe I'll file a BZ to just comprehensively clean it up in EDK2 if I don't see them, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah,
okay. Sense. All right, sounds good. Thank
They're
you.
not hard changes, but somebody just has to do the little bit of work to make sure that it's the exact replacement that it's supposed to be into their policy.
Yeah, I think it's just coming up because people are trying to get rid of their publication of the Varlock protocol, and they're having to carry code to basically produce both now. So it'd be nice to get it cleaned up. Okay, didn't want to take very much time with that. Thanks.
Okay, on the code coverage, I haven't done anything since last week. I don't know, Mike. I thought you were gonna poke the maintainer or the developer of those changes. I believe it's an Intel engineer. See if we can get a patch set that's rebased and maybe a new run in the PR system.
Okay, Yeah, it's up to, what is it, a V5? So that's the, yeah, there's one comment from Lemming on quite a while ago. So that has had no activity on the mailing list since September. Does that sound right?
Okay, I can believe that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will ping them.
Okay. So Don, do you want to talk anything about target-based testing into platform CI for OVMF?
Yeah, sure, Sean. Uh, as I mentioned before in the podcast, I just create I just add some shell unit test into a new OVMF CI job. I'm not sure if you have any comments about it. Yeah, I also checked your project about the shell unit test. I think maybe the code in my progress is some kindly similar to your proposal, right?
Yeah, I
think
mean, it's definitely similar. I guess the couple of concerns I had. So my first concern was that it seems like this was a lot of Azure pipeline changes, which means that this only runs in the server. And if you want to extend testing and do it locally, you have to kind of reverse engineer what the Azure pipelines are doing and figure that out.
I also, but I also run the test in my local. You with the coding OVMF package, with the steward, you just need to add a -u parameter to specify the unit test you want to check. Then the new Python file in OVMF package, it will build all the unit tests and then run them in the shell. I have tested it in my local.
Okay. So I guess why couldn't we have just added the -u parameter to all of the existing matrix of tests?
Yeah, it will be better. Cause I think maybe it may take more time to do it. So my plan is to only implement it in a OVMF package. If someone think it's better to have it in like unpackaged or in emulator, then we can do that. I think it will be better.
Okay. Okay, so that was one. It sounds like maybe I misunderstood how easy it was to run locally. The second one I mentioned was it looks like it only runs on Linux. Is that accurate?
Not. I also tried it in Windows. I created two new OVMF job, one in the Linux, another is in the Windows.
Okay.
Yes.
If that's the case, that's good. That gets rid of that concern. Let's see. And then I guess the last bit that I was looking for your thoughts on are it looks like you are including or you're like dynamically generating the list of what to compile based on the parameters passed into the user by the user with a package name colon like INF path. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. I I specify the unit test by this way, the INF file and the corresponding DSC file.
And so I was wondering why we didn't just add the unit tests to these platforms. And so that because oftentimes what I found over time is that the platforms need to map the correct libraries into the unit tests or into the shell-based tests. And some of those libraries might be platform-specific libraries. And so, you know, you actually need the syntax of the DSC where you can control how to, you know, how to map the libraries to be able to make the unit test work.
Yes, I think if we include the unit test IM file into the platform DSA may be better. But if in the future we may have more shell unit tests that we want to check, does it make sense that we added all into the OVMF platform DSA file? I'm not sure if OVMF package will be happy about it. So
I mean,
that's why,
you-
yeah. So
Yeah, you could
that's why
definitely put them behind a conditional if we don't want to build them every time, right? So if the OVMF package developers don't want to compile the shell-based tests every time they compile, we could put them behind a well-known macro that we must enable.
yeah, I think it's a good way. Yeah, Sean, you mean that we only added into DSC file and control it by some macro, and we will not add it into the FDF file, right?
Right. That's what we've traditionally done.
And
But we
John,
also actually like sometimes change PCD values because we have a couple of shell-based tests that kind of need the system to be in a less than secure state. And so we have, you know, I think that, you know, there's like the test mode PCD and there's a few other PCDs out there that have been used. We have one of those PCDs that kind of define this mode so that, you know, sometimes we have to like make sure we don't lock flash or do something dangerous. And therefore we have some sort of unit test mode that we can compile the whole system firmware in for the platform.
all right, so that clarifies like my question, Sean, that the purpose of this flag is not to just build the unit tests in isolation. It's to also support building, you want it to, if you set the flag, you want to build the firmware in its test compatible mode and build the unit tests.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think this is really not a core thing, right? So the core can define tests and should be authoring tests, but oftentimes, you know, you do need the platform mappings. And if you're compiling on, you know, ARM-vert versus OVMF or x86, your platform mappings are going to be very differently. And so we have found that trying to define them in a core, you know, DSC or to have a DSC Inc. is very hard because you need to control those mappings.
Okay. Well, I guess the source of the unit test, if it's in another package, can have a reference one that might be compatible with some systems, but the recommendation is that when you build those unit tests in the scope of a platform for platforms running from the shell, is that they include the INF in their DSC and do whatever lib mappings or PCDs they need for that unit test to run correctly.
Yeah.
So it would be more of a sample DSC if it's in another package about how to set it up and run with some instructions in that sample DSC. But the DSC Inc. is what you're suggesting we not do, but a sample DSC for the unit test and instructions on how to integrate it into the platform would be good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could even use the normal DSC for the package and just comment it, right? Because the normal DSC, we're going to want to compile these for as part of that package core
Right.
CI at that point, right? Not platform CI. And so we could describe that there. And we've been using the build option overrides to map out the libraries that we depend on that are not your, you know, base lib. Like, so anything, you know, more than a base library class, we have been defining directly into in the scope of the module so that it's like one copy and paste unit that you can move around. it's not the best. So if someone has a better idea, that's great. But you know, I think this is what we've found has been more reliable.
The other option is like you look at the build report and at the reference copy and see what's being linked to it, and then that gives you a really good idea of what you need to hook up.
Yeah, I mean, just like any module, right? Like the compiler, the linker, the whole system will tell you when you haven't included everything you should. So, okay, so I think then, so then I guess the last thing, like a more tactical thing that I noticed, right? It looked like you were just mapping in a folder from the file system.
Yes, Sean, you mean the folder that contained the startup-nsh file?
Yeah, so that worked really well for us until we started writing files back to the virtual drive from within the within the virtual machine. And then what we found was both Windows and Linux corrupted and just didn't work. And the drive was unreadable when we exited the virtual machine.
Is that the QEMU environment or the emulator package environment?
This is QEMU.
Yeah, I think QEMU says that if you map the file system drive, it's just a copy, like a RAM drive. It's not the actual live file system, right?
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say, so when we talked, I think with Laszlo a few years ago, and he said this was a known problem. And so what we have is a way to map in a real VHD file and then a bunch of Python code that actually supports adding and removing files from the VHD on Windows. And we found that to be extremely reliable. Now it's a whole nother set of junk you got to bring into the system. But that's that's one of the requirements we've seen. On Linux, I don't think we actually have an answer at the moment. It's just because we haven't spent the time to do it. Our belief is that these tests should not be host OS dependent, right? They don't really matter. So we've only been testing on Windows, which, we should be focused on cross-platform, but we haven't on that aspect.
Did you evaluate collecting results only from the log so that you run the test and what you do is capture the console log and everything has to be in there?
So yeah, I mean that was my next step to this. So the reason why this was important to us is we have a version of that report library of your unit test report lib that will write out JUnit style XML files for each test, just like you see for our host-based testing and such. And then we can automatically upload those to the Azure pipelines or any other kind of CI system, and they know how to parse them and show them and count them and track them just like any other set of tests. So that's been really nice, but so we haven't been parsing from the UFeed log. To make things worse, though, that XML library and that report library are not in EDK2 today. And so, we either have to stand up the effort to get those integrated into EDK2 if we wanted to follow suit, or do something different.
Sean,
Because
you
once,
mentioned,
I guess, Dunn, I'm wondering from you, what was your plan once you got how are you going to parse the results, and how are you going to make those results useful and available to the developer that's submitting the code change?
for the shell unit test log, yeah, it will also be published in the Azure pipeline. I just name it in the way that the like build log with the with a shell unit test name, and when I try to check the shell unit test boot log result, I just find some specified information. For example, the failure message, I'll check if it's null. But I think it will be better if we can use the library mentioned to pass the log.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the conclusion we came to as well, was that having a well-formed log for each test that was in an industry standard format was an ideal solution.
Yeah, but Sean, when will you try to upstream the code about the library mentioned?
I mean, we have no problem to upstream it. It's all open source and available, and we have a Bugzilla from 5 years ago at this point to add it. We just haven't done it. It's a new package.
Okay.
But it's actually a pretty good package because I think it has 2 or 3 libraries in it, including the main XML library, and then it has some unit tests for all of those libraries. And then it has this report library that converts the unit test report format into XML.
Okay. So Sean, do you think it may be possible that we can we can replace the code with your library later, and we can just yeah, I'm not sure if it's okay. We can just try to first we can implement the sharing test CI, and then we can replace the code with the library in the next step.
Yeah, I'm fine. I guess my only point of view is that I think unless you have a really good parser of the log, you're gonna have people fail tests and they won't know. And unless we have a system that breaks the build for them, they won't ever check the log in enough detail to know that they're actually passing all the tests or not. I don't know if you believe that your log parser has got enough, is error-proof enough in detecting when a shell-based unit test fails. But that would be my one concern.
Okay. Actually, my assumption is that the shell unit test log is in the format that is a format in the unit test framework debug message.
Okay. That's specific enough to be able to pull out of the log each time that I think maybe we do have a solution that can work fine. Yeah.
So also about the DSC file, I'm not sure if I get it correctly. So you think that it is better to include the IF file in the existing platform DSC file, or just another separate DSC file?
I think it makes the most sense to be in the platform's DSC file. I think shell-based testing is a feature of the platform.
Okay, then we can use a PCD to control it, and in the different platform job, we can set the PCD to true to enable it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but another concern is that about the pull request trigger condition. If we put it in the OVMF platform platform DSC file, but if the I may have a sharing tester in the UEF SCPU package, but if I put it in the platform CI file, in the platform DSC file, for the trigger condition. Like I may want to catch the change in the UEFI CPU package, but if I put it in the OVMF package DSC file, so how can I catch the changes in the UEFI CPU package? I'm not sure if we can do that.
So if you list it in the DSC file of OVMF, when OVMF parses to determine whether it needs to build on a given PR, like a change to the UEFI CPU package, it would see that that module is there and it depends upon it. If that changed, then it would rebuild it. So for each change in the entire EDK2 tree, we are checking every package whether they need to rebuild for core CI, and we're checking every platform if they need to rebuild based on their dependencies. And so that dependency should get caught.
Sean, you mean the you mentioned you mean the core CI, but in the platform CI, like we may specify a supported package list to be checked if we want to build this supported packages, right? This is the first step, and then we will find all we will figure out some specify packages in the package list based on some check rules, right? So like when I put a UEFI CPU packages shell in test IF in the OVMF DSC file. So how can I then to build the OVMF?
Right. So you're kind of talking about the PR eval step of the CI system.
Yes.
And in platform CI, it's a little bit different than core CI, right? So core CI, we provide a whole list of platforms, a whole list of packages, and then we eval if each package needs to be built based on the dependencies that we detect from that package. In platform CI, we do a similar thing using the same code, but the platform just supplies itself. So it says, for the OVMF platform, it would say, does the OVMF package need to be built? And it would then look at the DSC contents of the OVMF package, and it would evaluate all the INFs in there, and it would see the shell-based test, and then it would say, well, I have a dependency here, and that dependency changed, so I'm going to build OVMF package and test it.
Oh, okay. I know what you mean. You maybe you mean that we can use a callback to change the supported packages in the shell unit test CI job, right?
I'm
Like
saying, well, yeah, what I'm saying is that there's no change needed. This should just work. It should already be caught. For example, if you were to change the CPU package, CPU Dixie driver that is used in OVMF package, for example, OVMF would rebuild when you submitted that pull request, because even though no code changed in the OVMF package, code that OVMF was dependent upon changed. And so the same thing should happen here, given that we're going to list the unit tests in the platform package DSC.
Okay, I know, but okay, okay, I know it. But if we do that for the other job in the existing OVMF platform CI, then it will also be like this, like it will be influenced by this change, right?
So we need to look exactly like, so if we use a macro to enable this, and that macro is defined on the command line only for the matrices only for the jobs that are in the matrix for testing, then only these INFs should be detected when we're running with, shell test equals true. Does that make sense? So if this is protected by a macro, then that would be the only time we would rebuild.
Yes, sure.
So it would mean that we'll need to make the parameter to do the build something that is available in Stewart PR eval so that it knows how to correctly parse the DSC file for this parameter. That's the only piece that we'll need to look into a little bit. Otherwise, this whole thing should work.
Yes. Or with that.
Okay, so it sounds like if we move the DSC, the contents in the DSC, then the -u option will change a little bit, and the way this gets invoked will change.
Yes, we don't need the extra DSC file.
Right. So that should make things a little easier. And then we're going to still put the logs from the normal log mechanism, which means we can use the standard way to map the virtual drive. And if we ever decide to do something more beyond that, we'll have to come back and address these problems. But for now, this should be fine.
Yes.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is this, I'll put it in the chat window. That inside the change, if you just search for it, we should probably go ahead and get that typo fixed now. I think it was in the original code, and that's why it's in your code. But essentially what that does is it just no ops the is output thing being set to true. So the code around this is actually dependent on that not working at this point. So you can just remove that in your change if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I found it in the existing file, and then I used the same way to define another parameter.
Yeah, I know it was already in the code. It's been there for a long time. So I think as part of your change, you could just go ahead and get rid of it now. It doesn't have any. It doesn't have any effective purpose at this point, other than confusing people.
Okay. Yeah. Also, I found a way to use it in the document, and I found that if a parameter is defined with or without this is output, then the way to use it is different. So
yeah, exactly. Yes, if you actually fix the typo, it won't work. That's what I meant. The code is actually dependent on it not working. So if you just remove it, everything should be fine.
Okay, I'll try it.
Okay, sounds good. So I guess I'll wait to see another series, and if you can also put up the patch for PR at the same time, I find that to be much easier for me to be able to review.
Okay.
And then if there's any more comments or other people have ideas, please go use the GitHub discussions as a way to track those. That will be a permanent record that we'll be able to reference if we go back and try to understand why we did this. Any other thoughts here? All right. Mike, I don't know what your thoughts are on the Edk2 platform CI. I did email Nate and Andrew. I never saw any response on that one. I did open up a topic for discussion. and put some things in there that I hoped were inflammatory enough that someone might have a comment. And nobody did.
I have not had a chance to look at it yet myself, but I do think we need more people here to talk about the actual platform pieces. I'm wondering if there's an option to start a little bit smaller scope on improving EDK2 platforms, because we do have a number of features packages in there, which are effectively just packages. They're not platform specific in their own right. What do you think the opportunity is to apply our EDK2 CI to the feature packages?
So just do core CI.
Right.
Make sure, yeah.
It's a stepping stone, I mean, until we can get some, a larger conversation going.
Yeah, I
sounds
don't think that'd be a problem. I mean, we still have I guess one major problem, which is how do you control your dependency on EDK2? And we've kind of, that's been one of the touchy topics, is do you use a submodule that carries your dependency? Top of tree, or at that moment, the top of tree is not a very reliable method. So that would be my only, I think the only thing I can think of that would be still a problem.
You're saying that was resolved or not resolved?
No, that's not. I mean, that's been a point of contention in all of our conversations where we've actually had a conversation about this.
Yeah, there's three models possible. And like I've done some EDQ2 platform stuff by just pulling two peer repos into the agent workspace, right? And doing builds that way and pulling the version that you want. That's one model, and that's effectively what like the EDK repo tool does with a manifest, but you could do it manually in an agent or with a manifest like EDK repo. Option 2 is to have EDK2 platforms depend upon EDK2 as a submodule, which I think some of the feedback before has been when you do that, you're tying EDK2 platform specific version, and it takes away the choice of what version of EDK2 others might want to use that want to depend on some features from EDK2 platforms, but not necessarily the platforms inside of EDK2 platforms. So that's why I think the submodule, adding EDK2 as a submodule to EDK2 platforms is not a great idea. And then the third is you can actually create a separate repo for the purposes of running our CI that adds EDK2 and EDK2 platforms as submodules to that third repository, and that's what you're running it against and doing your manifest of the two versions of the two repos that you want to use for test purposes, which I think is the hybrid approach that says it's a Tiano core thing to pick the two versions we want to test against, or there can be different instances of that for different combinations if you need to test more than one combination. And it's not making a choice for EDK2 platform specifically for any consumer of that. And
I think I lost Mike.
I did too.
Yes.
Mike, we lost you. I don't know if you can hear us. All right. I mean, does anyone have any thoughts on these? This repo idea I think he's starting to push right now.
I didn't really understand the submodule issue. Like if someone forks EDK2 platforms, they can change the EDK2 submodule to be anything and everything they want.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get that. Like they could change the URL, you can change the ref it points to.
The only argument that kind of holds water for me is that for all of the different platforms in EDK2 platforms, they have to be aligned. Otherwise, it's confusing. But today, it's already so confusing and full of garbage that, like,
Well, and that's kind of true if you hold them to a ref, regardless of the logistics of that process. Right. I understand there are some drawbacks to submodules, but the advantage of them is that they're standardized well enough now that tons of tools already support them, rather than all this other custom stuff that's out there.
Well, let's give Mike another minute or two. And I guess my approach would be, if we're going to just take a core CI path here, it means we're not going to solve a bunch of problems, but at least we'll solve some things for the feature packages. If we just use a submodule, then we'd have a strong linkage between, when the feature package passed EDK2, and what level, what version of EDK2 it was at the time, which means that all the plugins and all the tests and all the requirements of what it means to be a good feature package are defined by that submodule version. And then as far as how you build platforms, well, you still have to write a README that tells you how to pull your dependencies, and you probably don't use, the submodule to populate your dependency.
Yeah, having all of the platforms in one repo kind of pulls in the overarching problem of that you all have to agree on what your repo looks like together. And so I think that's going to come up in several aspects of the discussion.
Okay, Mike's back. Maybe. I hit admitting, but he's just spitting for me. Hey, Michael, you want to try to admit him? I don't think it's anything with me, but for some reason, when I hit the checkbox, it doesn't do anything.
I've hit it a couple times as well.
Okay.
It just spins also.
Yeah. Hey, there we go. Mike, you're back?
Yes. I don't know.
All right.
I think a cable modem reset for some reason. So where I got cut off, did I get through my 3 options?
We heard the third one. I don't think we completely understood the value prop of that. And so I think that's about what you were when you got cut off.
Okay. It's about you don't want to add EDK2 as a submodule to EDK2 platforms, because that's making a choice and a potential increased pull time and duplicate content in the wrong version for a downstream consumer of an EDK2 platform's content. So I think there's several things that don't make sense about that one. As far as just getting some packages into testing, why can't we have an agent that just pulls two repos next to each other?
I mean, you can, I guess. So 2 comments. First comment, I think we kind of both, at least a few of us had, was on the submodule. You're right, but I think the expectation is that nobody actually uses EDK2 platforms directly as is, right? They have to fork it. They have to make changes to it.
That's
and
not
thus,
true. I can tell you that's not true. So no, that's not a correct assumption.
Okay. And so the environment that you use that in, you blindly just populate all submodules? Or do you selectively populate the submodules?
That's a policy. That's a policy for anybody.
Right. So if you had a submodule, you could go down a path and say, well, I don't want to populate that submodule for this repo because it doesn't work for me or it's not the right version.
Right, but you're then forcing the no submodules or have some extra tool to manage on top.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, so then on the other one, I guess the only complaint is you're adding yet another repo for someone to manage the versions. If you're just telling me we're gonna have a build file that pulls top of tree and top of tree, it's gonna get us that same problem of like, well, our top of tree in EDK2 changes rules relatively regularly. So something that built 3 months ago will not build today.
Right. So that, to me, that's about discussing what do we want to test, right? It's really about the combinations you want to test. And if we say master is one of them, then that's okay. But the question is, what do you do if there's a failure? Is it a blocking change or not, right?
Well, I'm saying that master isn't that useful tomorrow, right? Or in some point in the
not
future.
useful anywhere in the future because you don't have that tracked in history as to what you
Right.
tested at that time.
Well, you can always record it, what you tested, but yes, I understand what you're saying.
Right. That's essentially what the submodule does, or a version-based dependency tracker. I guess my main thing about submodules is I understand that the nested submodule thing can be problematic, but they're far better supported than custom kind of solutions that have been cooked up by tools and by workflows and everything else, because they're the kind of standard.
And that's where I landed on the third repo, because it gets you that exact property.
What was the third repo option again?
So if you create a third repo that just lists EDK2 as a submodule and EDK2 platforms as a submodule,
yeah,
in a directory structure, wherever it makes sense, then you point your tests at that repo to go do your pulls recursively for the scope of the test, and you get to manage the submodule versions for each. So you're using Git as your manifest. You're just doing it in a separate repo. So you're not making any choices for the EDK2 platforms repo about what submodule of the EDK2 it has in it. You're moving it into a separate repo that lists both of them at their submodule versions you want to test. And that's in that repo is specifically for test purposes.
Yeah, I think that resolves my concerns about the version dependency tracking.
Yeah, I mean, the only concern I have there is who's going to care, who's going to do it, right? Because that's part of that now the challenge.
We can get Dependabot on it and auto bump that submodule.
So if you believe people are going to look, especially the feature package maintainers, because they're the ones that are going to, fall out of compliance with the checkers that we have in EDK2, they're going to go look at this and care about this thing breaking, then I agree. But I think that's kind of the last piece of this puzzle that has to be solved is how to make them care.
So what would you suggest, just if we're focused on just initially the feature packages and EDK2 platforms, would you effectively lock in maybe EDK2 to the most recent stable tag and test the tip of EDK2 platforms? Or just so you're testing the PR really against EDK2 platforms, right?
Well, I think we need to probably test either both, like the last stable tag and the tip of EDK2, or just test the tip of EDK2, or but track that in a submodule, such that if you're submitting a change in EDK2 platforms and it doesn't work against the tip, then why are we going to have that in the EDK2 platforms code tree? Because if anyone were to pull EDK2, it wouldn't work. And it helps prepare the, it helps prepare the code for the upcoming stable tag.
Right, so that's effectively a master test of the PR, right?
But with, yes, but with master being pointed to.
The difference is that 6 months from now, you can go back and recreate that without any problems. But the gap that's still open is when all of a sudden someone adds a new test to EDK2 and it breaks, you need someone who feels ownership over integrating the new EDK2, and whether if it breaks all the feature packages, they need to feel that ownership to go then either fix them or do something, because you can no longer integrate with the tip of EDK2.
Right. I guess we could extend EDK2 testing to include the EDK2 platforms test as well, right? For feature packages.
Yeah, but I think in the past we've said that's inverted in terms of the dependency relationship, but it would solve the testing problem.
I guess the other thing, my other point there is we don't even have every package in EDK2 today because our maintainership is not committed to this enough in some of those, non-critical packages that happen to be in EDK2. I feel like the same thing would happen here. But I say that as not a maintainer of an EDK2 feature package. So if they believe that there's commitment to it, then I think it's good.
Yeah, I think from the EDK2 platform's maintainer's perspective, having a careful, well-planned sync with EDK2 when they choose to move forward on EDK2 such that they have a chance to catch up. And then obviously we want to get to master being stable most of the time. But if there's a breaking change added to EDK2, you'd want to give the platform's side a chance to catch up, right?
Right.
Well, their chance to catch up could also be that they can't get anything in until they fix it.
Yes. So I think that's the scenarios that need to be painted out and get buy-in, starting with the feature package owners. And if we can't get buy-in from the feature packages, I would claim the platform packages are more complicated, right, than that. So I think we've got to figure that out, or and if nobody can commit to the feature package thing or the platforms thing, then we have to figure out a different approach to maintain this content. But let's at least paint out what we think the process should be from a feature package owner to keep their stuff healthy. What would be the configuration and who would have the responsibility of bumping the submodule versions up or whatever, and who has to fix things and that kind of stuff that is part of our PR process for submitting for CI for results on the EDK2 platforms. Because what would the developer experience be, and how would they react to different types of failures that would be new types of failures because we're dealing with multiple repos?
Would these failures show up on EDK2's main PR gate system, or would it show up in EDK2 platform's PR gate system?
It's a great question. I think that's what we've got to kind of game through what that should look like.
I guess I'm curious to your thoughts. I still don't believe that we should be gating EDK2, which I believe is lower in the stack or more common or core than EDK2 platforms. On EDK2 platforms, I think it is okay to break downstream as long as it's properly documented and controlled.
Right. And I tend to agree with that fundamental assumption, and I think it's good to document that, saying EDK2 is only validated in itself, and then for CI testing, and then EDK2 platforms can choose not to move forward if there's a breaking change until they fix it. So I guess the pattern that would work there is, in order to if there's a breaking change from EDK2 that breaks something in EDK2 platforms, then the owner for the component that's broken would have to fix that and move to a newer version of EDK2 as part of the same change, right?
Yes. That's the great amount of metadata that is really useful for people because they can see what changes needed to happen to integrate the newest EDK2.
Yeah.
Now thinking about this, and Michael, I know you're familiar with our Stewart CI setup where we have basically in that Python file we list out the dependencies in their ref. What would be any different than just using that, and then we wouldn't have to have a second repo? And since CI settings is basically for core CI, feature package CI that we're talking about now, that dependency would only be used there, and you would rev that when you were ready to move forward.
You're talking about using an X step?
No, I'm
Like-
talking about using our CI setup, which is where we just have the dependency listed in like get dependencies or get required dependencies, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Right. This is what we do in our project Mu, Mu base core, Mu, well, not Mu base core anymore, but Mu plus, Mu Tiano plus.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to manually go and update the ref, then I think that can accomplish the same thing effectively. The advantage to doing it in the other repo with the submodule was that Dependabot could manage that essentially for us. And like if something were to go into EDK2, it could bump the EDK2 submodule, and then we could trigger an EDK2 platform build on that file being bumped and then see that it no longer works, right? And that would be the alert moment that work needs to be done to get it back working again. So I don't know. Either way could work depending on what we want to get out of it.
Can you think of though, since now we have two submodules in a different repo, can you think of how we make that build, that status check a dependency for EDK2 platforms to check in, right?
Well, I think we can do it in the GitHub settings. We can add it as a branch policy status check rule. Because that's just going to point to a pipeline on Azure Pipelines, right? It doesn't really care about its association to a particular GitHub repo. So we can have it report that status.
Okay. And we'll have to write custom code to basically get the PR branch and check that out as the EDK2 platforms submodule.
I think so, but I think the checkout step will do that for us for the most part. Or the checkout action, I guess I should say, if we were to just write that over there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we could technically make this work without a ton of effort. I think it's more like policy making and kind of trudging through the platform code and getting it all up to date. That's going to be almost more of the effort.
Right. Hence let's focus on the packages that we have lots of experience on, the style to test, which was the feature one first, and establish the pattern for keeping that stuff healthy, and then we can try to do maybe absorb one platform at a time by doing a more focused conversation with a smaller set of platform owners. And if it's like maybe this time of the day is terrible for them, but let's figure out how to, once we show that it can work for a feature package, and then we'll go do one platform package in that same way of managing the dependencies or the refs that we're testing against.
And are we pretty set on having one EDK2 pointer, or are we open to potentially allowing features to control their own pointers.
I think one EDK2 pointer for all of EDK2 platforms.
Okay.
Because think about one of the requests we've had, and this has been, I think, when we started this meeting, we captured a bunch of potential work items. One of them was the idea of an EDK2 platform stable tag. And so that's what I'm wanting to get to with this ability to do more testing, is to have a matched pair of tags between EDK2 and EDK2 platforms that we say are stable at our stable tag point.
Yeah, and I think if we keep all the features in that one repo, that makes sense to do. And I'd also like to see the tag to tag mapping.
So I guess at most, Sean, maybe this is just a request to try a prototype of that, see if it works. If there's lots of things that are challenging, come back again. If it looks like it's going to work, put a proposal together to the mailing list about enabling that simple mechanism for the feature package. I shouldn't say simple, enabling that mechanism for the features packages.
I think we
Okay.
might want to give like some homework to the feature owners at some point, whether it's like in the next week's meeting or something, to like confirm that their feature packages are building against what tool chains, and also that they're kind of like up to date and ready to go for this, because it'd be kind of annoying to be working on this infrastructure and then run into lots of build problems with them.
Okay, that's fair. And I know we phase things in the EDK2 repo as well, as far as putting the YAML files in with a lot of stuff turned off and turn things on over time. So I think we've established that as a pattern to deal with the various timelines of the different package owners.
Yeah, I think just looking for like basic stuff, like do you build on GCC5, Windows? Have you tested a Linux build so you don't have like file path issues? What version of Python do you support? All that, like it'd be like, we just don't want to get into the point where we're enabling the infrastructure and like half the stuff doesn't work on Python 3.10 or something.
Okay. Well, I hope the feature packages don't have too much of that kind of, I know the platforms do. I hope the feature packages don't have those kinds of issues as much.
Yeah, I agree. I think that'll be the case, but it'd be good for them to just do that checkup.
That's fair.
Okay, well, I think, there's at least something there. Okay, anything else anyone wants to add? So Mike, you're going to talk with the feature package owners, tell them that this is coming, tell them that they're going to need to turn on these tests in their CI YAML file, and kind of clean some things up, declare what's acceptable dependencies for them, and do that kind of work. And then we'll try to prototype out the build pipeline infrastructure and get to a proof of concept.
Yeah, and if that's really hard, set it aside and come back for more discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, there's another discussion around like, why are the feature packages mixed with the platform packages? And why not put the individual feature packages out there on their own so that you can actually track, the history of those feature packages is much easier to see than if they're not intermixed with, a mono repo full of other junk. So I think there's a lot of other questions around this that I'm not sure I completely agree with the strategy we're going down here, but I'm not opposed to trying to get, the core CI cleanups on these feature packages.
Yeah, this is just about quality. It's not about it's not an organization discussion. It's about how do we get improved quality of what we have in its current location. But I don't disagree with your observation of, what's the best way to manage this stuff long term, and we've kind of gone back and forth on that conversation over the many years with different ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, at some point we should make like a form that maintainers have to sign or something that says they'll abide by the CI checks that we have because having to like argue and dispute it on a per package basis is kind of exhausting about this stuff.
I agree. Have you seen the Who We Are wiki page that describes the roles and responsibilities for maintainers, reviewers, contributors, stewards, and the community manager?
Yeah, I do remember that.
That would be a good place that if you think that there's something about roles and responsibilities that you think it needs to be clearly outlined, that's what you could get updated through Mickey, the community manager, and get the changes reviewed with the community, have her drive that. And then if somebody complains, you can point at the roles and responsibilities.
Okay. Yeah, because there was someone else submitting a spelling check series, and like we've done the spelling check series several times, and they're kind of like hit or miss on whether we care about typos this month or not. And it'd be nice to just say let's turn on spell check and get it done, type of a thing.
Yep. Agreed.
All right.
Okay, anyone have anything else? My suggestion was that we probably don't host this meeting until January 9th. Any concerns from anyone? Okay.
In terms of like conversations around the EDK2 platform stuff, are we okay with using the discussions area of EDK2 platforms, or do we want to keep that strictly on the mailing list? Because like right now in EDK2, it's kind of convenient to have the hybrid approach for some of these things. But I don't think we've really used discussions in platforms yet.
No, you'd have to reach out to the individuals to see if they're okay using discussions or if they prefer the mailing list.
Okay.
You have to get an active ACK to use discussions, I think is my suggestion.
Okay, I'll ask them for an act by.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.